there's a system in FontLab that will let you use anchors to have your accents placed very precisely. I don't use that myself. I've never used it. I know how to use it. I just don't like it. I like to manually place the accents because I'm not quite sure where they should be until I actually start placing them. So I just find by the time I've figured that out, I could just move all the accents manually. So in a case like this, you can see this is not exactly in the center of the Y because I've shifted it until it looks right. And then I write down what that offset is. So in this case, it was probably 30. So I 30 from the center or wherever it was automatically generated. So I will write that down and I'll know that is supposed to be offset. With the S, I know this thing is not exactly in the middle. I kind of shift it over to the right a little bit, so I write down what all the S's should be. So I make little notes about what all the offsets are for each accent. I make these notes, and they're going to have to be a little different for the light version, but it's good to have the notes there anyway. Okay, and here's my... See, I didn't mash the ring into the A. You don't have to do that. In fact, I think it looks better when you don't. I'd rather have a more squished ring on the A. Now, when you're dealing with accents, you're going to have these overhangs. So if I just generate this I diaeresis, this is going to overhang and it's going to kind of hit other stuff. Like if you follow this with an F or something, which doesn't normally happen in French, but some languages it will happen, so you're never sure. So what I do is I put a 0 side bearing on there, just to make sure it doesn't actually collide with anything. And yeah, it kind of spoils the rhythm, and you're never going to have two of these in a row like this, but to me that's better than having it collide. What I used to do is I used to kern it, but now I'm supporting so many languages, I have no idea what this thing's going to be going to end up next to with all these languages. Like, there's no way of keeping track of all that stuff. So what I do is I do it this way, and then when I'm testing, I just make sure, and sometimes I'll actually negative kern this back into something if it doesn't look right. But I'd rather do that than have it, that way at least I'll know it'll never collide, and then when it needs to, I can pull it in. Okay. Now, when you're dealing with Vietnamese, if you're dealing with Vietnamese characters, they're not going to fit under this bar. If you have pretty generous height for your accents, then yeah, maybe you can squeeze them in. But then, should you be squeezing them in? When I look at other people, the way other companies deal with it, I mean, the choice is you squeeze it under the line, you set the line higher, or you let it hang over the line. I look at Apple, I look at Adobe fonts and Windows System fonts. I know some of the Windows System fonts have tried to squeeze them in, have successfully squeezed them in, but then it ends up making the metrics for the regular size smaller, so this A is going to be shrunk down when you type it next to other words. I kind of want it to end up at a normal size so people don't say, hey, why is your font so small? So let them hang over the top, I say. Most applications will be able to deal with it if you give it a little bit of extra height, and I think anybody who's ever dealing with Vietnamese text already knows they're going to have to give it some extra leading between the lines. Like, it's, you know, that's just part of the Vietnamese deal, is the accents go high, they're stacked, so let them go past that line. You're going to get a warning when you export, hey, your thing's wrong, but that's why. If you're doing the lowercase Vietnamese, you can have it, this is my my maximum height, I can still have it come right up to that maximum height and still stack it. But if you'll notice, this is the capital circumflex, so this is actually a little bit squished down. You're going to have the regular circumflex a little higher, and this one's squished down just to make it fit more nicely. So it's kind of handy having those capital accents to when you need something squishy. Squishy. Now I'm making the small, you're supposed to have numerators, denominators, inferiors and superiors. If your font is not like a scientific font, I think it's fine just to have inferiors, superiors instead of numerators, denominators, and just use those to make the fractions. Whether or not they should dip down below the line, you need to decide that for yourself. I figured for this sort of techno-looking font, I just want it to line up with the bottom. So you can see here, this is my dual-purpose denominators, inferiors. And I'm manually, there's no magical way of doing this, I'm manually making these fatter. And so now I'm auto-generating the superiors, and then I'm just going to shift them all up to the top. So these are going to be composites. So there's going to be copies of the regular ones. And that's what I'm going to use to generate my fractions. So this will generate fractions. One superior fraction is the fraction slash, which has some negative side bearing, so it kind of ends up. So you can see, obviously, these are going to need adjusting, but some of them end up okay. Now I'm starting to fill in the Cyrillic set. I didn't do the Greek yet, but you can see, look at these things. Look at this square U. This is going to be thrown away. It's in red. This ge flip. This is used to make stuff like this. See how there's like a little tab on this side? It's the, it's easier to do one and then just reuse it and then remove the overlap later than to try to make sure the measurements are okay. Because, hey, it may not seem like a big deal to measure it while you're here in the heavy version, but when you go and do the ultralight, it's going to be a real pain if you try to make sure all those measurements are exactly the same. So I find the more components you can use, the better. You can see I've used the lowercase j, dotless j, to make this here. This is not going to look like that. It's going to have a nicer curve at the bottom, but the blue means do surgery on it later. You can see how these don't quite line up, but it's just going to make it easier. Alright? Now, what is with the pink, you might ask? Well, what I do is I go through and I mark anything that's not necessary to have two versions of. So this H, which is not really an H, it's a Cyrillic character that looks like exactly like the H. Well, why do I need an H and an H? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark all these, I'm going to write them all down, and I'm going to get these Unicode values and I'm going to add them to the Unicode. So I can take the Unicode for the A, and I'm going to add 0410 to the Unicode, and I'm going to delete this. And later when I do the Greek alpha, which looks exactly like this, I'm going to take whatever the Unicode is for the Greek alpha and add that to the A. So we're going to see that a little bit later. So now, where are we? I'm trying to remember what this one was about. Yeah. Oh, okay, I've removed them. So I've added those Unicode values, I think. Have I? I don't know what this is. I made this about a month ago, so I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking at. Okay, and time marches forward because it's time to do the Greek. The Greek takes a couple of days at least. This one may have taken 3 days to do the Greek. Greek's really hard. It's like doing a whole new alphabet, and there's not a lot you can reuse in the lowercase. Lowercase, a lot of custom stuff, a lot of pieces that you have to make from scratch because they're not things you can borrow from other things. You can see this kappa is the same as the Russian K that doesn't have a top on it, whatever that's called. So there you go. Okay, Greek. Greek is hard because it's weird. I mean, it's not the same. The capitals tend to be the same, very similar, but then the lowercase, you got to think when people were writing this stuff, they're writing from left and right, like from the sides. When you're learning to write the alphabet in English, you're writing B, D, right? A lot of the lines come from the top. In Greek, they come from the sides. You got, even though this is not drawn with a pen, the Greek eye is expecting certain shapes, and there's certain decisions that have to be made that are based on that idea. Even though I don't draw with strokes, I draw with shapes and negative space, but still with Greek it's tricky. I'm still learning. Okay, well here's an example of that double mapping thing I was talking about. Okay, I don't need this and this. These are exactly the same. Now if you have a cedilla that looks, if you have a cedilla that looks like a cedilla, then yeah, you might want to have two separate ones, but these are exactly the same thing. So I'm going to map this Unicode. You can see here I've added 0218 to the Unicode 015E, which is this one. And that's going to go, and then I'm going to delete that. Okay? So now I've gone through and done that, And now you can see the red that shows up here. This is telling me, warning, this is weird. What are you doing? Why does this K have 3 separate Unicodes? This is not legal. Well, guess what? It is legal. It totally works fine doing this. Why do this? Why not just make 3 copies of the K? Well, it's margin of error. You have a chance of screwing up the spacing 3 times in 3 different ways, and it makes the file size a tiny bit smaller. When you're doing the current classes, you don't have to include it in the current class. You can just have 1K. That's the main reasons, is why do everything 3 times. It seems fine when you're doing this way, but wait till you start doing the lighter weight. And then imagine you're adding a width axis. Well, now you've got a wide heavy, you've got a narrow heavy, you've got a wide thin, you've got a narrow thin. Okay, and then you start adding more axes than that, and it's axes than that, and there's a lot of chances for error. So this makes it a lot simpler to deal with. Okay, so you can see all the ones marked in red. I don't have a system for this because it's different with different fonts. Sometimes this K is going to be different than the Cyrillic K and the Kappa. It just depends on the font. So I don't like to have a rule ahead of time. It's really handy for stuff like this because this E with diaresis will show up in several languages. Why repeat it? Look, even the schwa down there. Look at that. It's used like 3 times, I think. Alright, so now kerning classes. Kerning classes, if you don't know how to do kerning classes, you gotta take a day off, sit down and learn it, because this is gonna save you so much time and prevent errors. It prevents kerning errors by doing this. It's not just lazy, it's smart and lazy. You can see I've marked left and right. This is the left side of the A, this is the right side of the A. I don't know why it's like the kerning. My brain doesn't work because the kerning on the right is on the left side. So these check marks are on the opposite side. This way it makes sense to me. You know, what's on the left? This is the left side of the A. That's what I'm thinking about. So I take everything that's got the same side as the left side of the A, like all the accented A's, the AE, all that kind of stuff, and I'll go on paper and kind of plan it out. I see the left side of the O is going to be the right side of the C. I try to find all the equivalents and really spend time trying to find like a lowest common denominator, just trying to optimize this thing to the cleanest thing I can find. So I spent a lot of time on this, and you can see here's the O. The left side of the O, look at all the stuff in there. This is all stuff that shares the left side of the O. Now, if I'm pushing my luck, if something in there is wrong or it's going to cause some kind of collision, yeah, the A is wrong here. I got to fix that. You push your luck. You know, is this schwa really correct? Not really, but it's probably going to be okay. So I try to do it, and then later I can take it out if it's a problem. So when I'm testing, I see something, it's like, I shouldn't have put that in. Well, it's really easy to take it out of the class later. It's really no big deal. So spend time learning how to do kerning classes. It's really worth it. And then you can test your kerning classes with this little magical button here, and it says no errors found. Otherwise, you can go and debug it. You can't have the same thing in 2 different classes, blah, blah, blah. All right, a little bit of very little coding in this font. I've got the inferiors and superiors. I made a num class, inf. So you can see here, sup and inf. That's the superiors and inferiors. So focus, okay? So all it is the numeral 0 to 9, and then superiors is the little, the ones that are high, superior 1 to 9, and then the little tiny 1 to 9. That's all it is. And there's a fraction feature that's just going to automatically substitute fractions, and easy. So, but sometimes these fonts get complicated. This one's a really simple one.